get it in the meeting points. So welcome everybody. Thank you for joining. Today's Monday, January 20. You have joined the CNCF Kubeflow Model Registry bi-weekly call. This meeting is being recorded, and this meeting adheres to the CNCF Code of Conduct. The way that we typically run this meeting is that we have some agenda points that is being pre-populated, as you can see. And typically we go through any sort of like updates or follow-up actions or community questions that we receive. So with that, I know that today we have actually a couple of points that people have put in that they want to discuss. And without further ado, I think that I've received a request that from the UI team to discuss this point as the first one. So I don't know if either of Eder, Lucas, or Griffin wants to take on this point.
Yeah, I don't mind speaking to it. There's a model registry issue there linked. This was done based off guidance from a previous meeting we had. Now that our manifests are done and tested, obviously up to open for changes, of course, and that's kind of the point of this, is for a final review from people outside of just the UI development team to take a look and see what they think about our deployment structure, what the architecture will look like, and then kind of discussing in the thread already is how we're going to deploy this, because I made a note that we would likely want a separate command to deploy the model registry UI, since you only need one UI managing multiple model registries. And if you deploy a UI every time with a model registry, then you'll just have a bunch of UIs that duplicate resources. From the sound of it, Matteo, you had a pretty simple idea of just adding an extra apply command the same way we do, Istio overlays and the CSI overlay, which I think is probably the best call out, and we can just have a README describing how the UI is supporting multiple instances.
Yeah, so just to put maybe more context to this comment that you're referring to, Griffin. So let's say, for instance, if I go to kubeflow.org, I go to get started, I go to components, model registry. So this is the sort of like how we guide the users to install it. And it has basically sort of like one section, which is sort of like the thing that is done thing that is needs to be done for every model registry. And here we start to have a section that is like opt-ins or things that sort of like we suggest for the users to do, but of course they are free to skip or decide to do whatever we can. So I would think similarly that you can have an entry point, just copy pasta and then sort of like update it for the UI. Maybe also call out here that the UI supports multiple registry instances in case that those are deployed. So that is also referred to as well in the same place, but indeed in the README of the sort of like subroot of your manifest, I think is important to call it out. But in general, I think this is a simple way that people do. The thing to me is that making the manifest in the root of the repo. So currently today we have them in model registry. If I had to go to manifest customize, so making them available here is very much recommended so that we can sync it to the kubeflow/manifest repo. Lucas, I see you have raised hands. If you're speaking, you're muted.
Yeah, I was sorry. Yeah, really, like our proposal was just that, like, add maybe a new folder which is maybe UI or something like that with our current structure and something like that, and add an extra entry in the readmes, just to like get the information of how to deploy the UI. And if I'm not even sure that's something we wanted to bring in this meeting, just like a question for you guys. Are we planning on making model registry a default component of Kubeflow for 1.10, or is it something that we haven't decided yet?
No, there was never in the roadmap to make it a default components, because the question there will be, since now we are alpha, it depends first if we move it to beta, then we need to have upgrade path, then we will have to have answers about the security connections, we will need to have answers about multiple tenancy. So the answer there is clearly no. So indeed, why I'm saying having the UI manifest in here, sort of like it's building on top of what is being done currently, and then we sort of like we will move together as a next step. I mean, see what we can do for in 1.11 to sort of like improve it on the target to make it a default component.
Perfect. Well, that was our expectations for this release we weren't a default, but it was just asking in case, because like just to plan ahead of like how to make that happen, but we have then more time for that. The other thing that I wanted to add, which is a proposal, and I wanted to bring it here too. Can I have a second the screen?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so like loved your suggestion of just adding an entry point for the UI, because our expectation is that now that we are bringing the like the ability to get multiple instances of model registries. But as you know, like the problem with the Kubeflow UI, the Kubeflow dashboard, is that they have this weird namespace handling in which users that are created, they have their own profiles and they have their own namespaces, and they cannot access by default to the default Kubeflow namespace. So that was one of the things. So our proposal, it's just like this is a midstream code in which we had the administrator, which is like the part of that we had in the other product. We want to change this maybe this week or something like that as a bug fix to change a little bit the layout, and maybe instead of having a who's my administrator and this kind of prompt, having here the external link to the Kubeflow nodes to just point out how to deploy a model registry. So if users are prompted by an empty screen in their default namespace without the model registry, they have like a visual cue in how to deploy model registries just by the dashboard, like not having to read the docs or something like that. Do you find that helpful, or like it's just a proposal, but it's something that we can add into the product itself in Kubeflow?
Yeah, so let me just try to paraphrase to make sure that I understand correctly. In my opinion, unlikely case that the user have deployed the model registry UI without having deployed any model registry instance. So sort of like in the tutorial, they skip the step of deploying model registry, they skip the step of model registry CSI, and they just go straight to deploy the model registry UI only. Then this one should link to that tutorial to say, hey, you forgot to deploy at least one instance of model registry, and the instruction to do that are there. So
that's right.
All right. Sounds a great idea to me. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll bring that into the code base, and I'll propose that later today or maybe tomorrow. So yeah, perfect. That was the one topic I wanted to bring here.
Yeah, and just for the purpose of the recording, that maybe doesn't show in the YouTube recording, there were also great reaction of thumbs up by others attendees here.
Yeah.
Griffin, sorry me to cut the line. I forgot. It's just a quick. Milos, just to let you know, Lucas has this PR to send and also have one PR before we being able to do code freeze.
Yeah, that's for Milo. Yeah, Milo is here. Perfect. Yeah, that was the other thing. We haven't got a code freeze still because there's this PR in which we are bringing this code, and like there's some tweaks that we need to do later this week, but we are bringing that as bug fixes since they are like fixes around where we have brought this last week. But so far today we are cutting all the logic changes. Like apart from that, will be just CSS. Issues that we might have with Material UI, or like these changes of text or something like that. But we are bringing all the logic code, all the business logic code. It's just finished with my last PR today.
So if I understand correctly, practically, like let's say we want to create release on Wednesday, right? What we'll have, like we'll have this feature, but it will not work correctly, and then we will fix it with like some pull request on that on top of it, like some bug fix.
I don't know. Everything will be working, but like some small changes, such as like there's this material UI. So there, with that last PR, there's some inconsistencies in some buttons or something like that. It's just not any like
okay.
there's no major bugs. But if there's something that we need to enhance a little bit, we'll do follow-ups.
Right.
This couple of weeks. It's just like we're bringing a lot of changes from midstream, and we need to do a thorough review of them. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Griffin.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note, if you are adding like a help text for, hey, you don't have a model registry here, I would make sure that we include the namespace. Like if you just did a default Kubeflow install, it would be like Kubeflow user example.com is your namespace profile. So it's possible they followed the docs and deployed a model registry in the Kubeflow namespace, but because their user is not the Kubeflow user, that's why they can't see it in the UI. So like maybe just like parameterize it with the namespace that they're currently in if you're giving them the command to deploy it.
That's a great point. That's something that we address the garage, Mateo. Like one of the problem with the Kubeflow dashboard is that some users might not have access to the default Kubeflow namespace. Like by default, they might have like Kubeflow deployed in Kubeflow namespace, but we discovered that some users might not have access to that namespace. So that's why like maybe we can prompt that and make it like if some users they only have access to their own namespace handled by the Kubeflow UI, like they have the instructions to just parameterize a model registry instance deployment on that given namespace. And Dirash?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're going to have to differentiate between not being able to access any model registries and you're not having any model registries, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And that's straight out Kubernetes access permissions. Like if some users don't have access to the default Kubeflow namespace, it's just like they cannot access the model registry instance itself. So maybe they want to create one in their own namespace, in which they might have access to.
Just on this one, Lucas, I'm not sure I understood correctly. So let's say that I'm following the tutorial to install Kubeflow from the Kubeflow/manifest.
Mhm.
Then I follow the tutorial of today to deploy the model registry.
Mhm.
Then I will follow the addition to the tutorial that, as we just said, is going to be added to deploy the model registry UI. Will I be able to see from the UI that model registry instance?
Depending, if you logged into Kubeflow dashboard, which uses text, and you have like an admin user, you might be able to access the Kubeflow namespace in which you deploy the model registry instance. But if somehow like some other user that might not have access to that, it's just like straight up Kubernetes permissions. If you then if you follow everything, you create an instance, another user who might not have access to that Kubeflow namespace logged in, they will they will have a Kubeflow UI with the model registry, like the namespace selector, just in their own default namespace. I'm not sure if I'm explaining. I can spawn like model registry, or I'm not sure if you have that Griffin right there, because it's easier to see in the UI. Like by default,
Kubeflow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share my screen.
Okay. So like the main issue, if you follow the instructions at first to deploy Kubeflow in dev mode, the default user might won't have access to the Kubeflow namespace, because they have like a limited amount of yeah. So this is Kubeflow dashboard. If you see like that user in like the default user will only be able to access this Kubeflow user example com namespace. They won't be able to access Kubeflow namespace. So the Kubeflow instance, like a model registry instance that you have installed in model in following the tutorials, won't be accessed by this user. If you give that user access, like Kubernetes permissions to access the Kubeflow namespace, they could access that model registry instance. But so far, like maybe we can prompt that there too. But so far, like yeah, here you have like the how to manage some of the profile membership and everything else right here. So it's just a matter, like the experience right now, what that we've bumped into is that Kubeflow UI manages a little bit like slightly different, at least the default users, kind of weird. Like they don't have access to the Kubeflow namespace. So that's why if you follow instructions to deploy that, you won't have access to the model registry instance deployed in a Kubeflow namespace.
Okay, but isn't this then sort of like an issue that we have? I mean, it's like, at least from the tutorial, I can understand if we needed to define some additional things or sort of like instruct, but sorry, let me take it one step back.
Yeah.
It's a bit, I have some doubt here because say that we are following a tutorial and then actually it's not going to work. So let's say what I'm trying to understand is that if we are giving the people a tutorial and then some additional action are required, then this should be actually be made in the tutorial of the UI, because otherwise, where we speak about the UI, because otherwise the people are going to follow the instructions and then they are not going to be able to see the results. So this is what I would encourage to make sure that we list everything. With regards to the dashboard integration, somehow, anyway, my suggestion is that have you synced with the, I don't know, Kubeflow manifest working groups for the security part and with the central dashboard? Because here sounds to me like these details need to be defined with them, as also maybe previously noted. So do we have some feedback from those working groups about what will be the best way to integrate efficiently or that doesn't require additional actions?
No, that's a great question. We haven't reached anyone out from the central dashboard to solve this issue because there's, like, to be honest, I'm not even sure if this is a issue. Like, well, I mean, it's an issue now that you talk about that. Like, following the instructions, it won't make the model registry available. But yeah, as Griffin said, like this is an issue for model registry since there's no controller. Every other component, they have the controller in Kubeflow, and then like you deploy something in other namespaces. And I think that's the assumption in the central dashboard. Like you won't be able at first to access that specific namespace if you are a permissionless user. And they create permissionless users without access to that Kubeflow namespace. So like solutions might be like giving users access to the Kubeflow namespace, but then again, like that might mess up that specific namespace. Or the other solution is just to like give a specific prompt to the users to say like, hey, if you wanna have model registry in your own namespace, deploy here. So like that's a great point, and I'm glad that we are discussing this because like we bumped into this problem in last week, and we weren't sure how to.
Let me actually just sort of like actually I have a question that I've added to the meeting notes because in their listing they were asking something that maybe also can if I just put in context is what is overall the state for the integration with the central dashboard and this UI? because they've asked about this in the previous release team meetings. So is the integration with the central dashboard sort of like done?
Yeah, it's already done. Yeah, we have all the.
No,
all the-
it's done, but not integrated because of with this issue. Like we need to figure out the deployment process so everything works. But we have all the bits already implemented, integrated with it. It's like
Okay.
we are able to install in the center dashboard and the integration. It's like Griffin. One thing, Mato, just to cut up you on this, that could be our option when we decide. That's why Lucas and I and Griffin are talking about how we are going to promote this, because another alternative would be also to install Model Registry by default in another namespace, like Model Registry namespace. And then when I create a user in the central dashboard, user create his own namespace, and we do the access for that user in this Model Registry namespace, default namespace, instead of having to install by default in the Kubeflow, and users needed to do open the Kubeflow namespace for everyone. So we need to discuss, like, it's more like as a group how we deploy.
You've just proposed the same thing that we have in midstream, which is like we have a special namespace and we deploy all the model registry instances and everything else. Yeah, like that's the point. Like we bumped into, well, not the same issue, like the same logic that as we have midstream, which is like model registries are instances that are deployed somewhere, and like the dashboard itself can access, like it's behaving as a default Kubernetes user, in which like they can access the namespace that they have access right. So it's just a matter of like if we deploy in, for example, the default one, which is Kubeflow, whether the default users could access to that same namespace or not. Yeah, Dirash.
Diraj, if you are speaking, we cannot hear.
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I had to switch microphone sources. So even if it's a designated namespace, right, for model registry instances, we'll still have the same issues, in the sense, there could still be users that do not have access to specific model registry instances, right? So in midstream and downstream, that's how we would do it. We create a special role for every model registry, so that we can control access to individual model registry instances, even though they all live in a common namespace, right? So even if it's the namespace is not named Kubeflow, even if it's some other namespace, your access control problems don't go away, is what I'm trying to say. But there might be other considerations, like there might be other things living in the Kubeflow namespace that granting access to them might be a little tricky. So yeah, you could simplify certain things, but not get rid of all the access control considerations.
Yeah, that's right, and that's exactly the same logic that we've been following in midstream. So it's the same. That's why, like, our proposal is just to as we did in midstream, with that blank page in which we were asking about administrators, and they were the ones managing everything and so on. Add that information in that page so users are aware of what's the issue and how to fix that. So that's that.
So just also just to make some example, because I want to make sure that I understand what Eder was mentioning earlier. So when you speak about having by default the installation, sort of like your proposal is that we go that instead of applying this to Kubeflow, you apply this to Kubeflow user one from the tutorial, and same things here as well. Is this?
Could be. I would propose not in the user namespace, but I would propose to apply this by default in some like Kubeflow model registry namespace.
All right. So what is the working group manifest view on this one?
I don't know. I didn't propose this, but because I'd like to double check with you guys before.
Yeah, it's
Because
just like
because we wonder why we don't want to do these decisions alone. Like that's why
Yes,
we're waiting for the for this call.
yeah, that's seriously like maybe Kubeflow model registries, because then like we can go back with that action item to the central dashboard and say like, hey, profiles and namespace, like namespace are controlled by profiles. So they like that's a custom resource managed by Kubeflow, in which then they create some users and role bindings and everything else to make sure a user can access certain namespaces. So it's just a matter of proposing that into the central dashboard and say like, hey, can we add this permission to say like, if you create a new profile, every user can then like has a role binding to access this Kubeflow model registry username namespace. So like by default, users can like could be prompted to that share a model registry, and then if they wanna, and then if they create another namespace and they access through the namespace selector to that namespace and it's empty because there's no model registry instance right there, we point to the instructions to deploy another custom model registrants in another given namespace. But like having a default, like following the tutorial, having the users be available to have that namespace, and that will be consistent with the behavior that we have midstream then. So it will be amazing.
Yeah, because this sounds like, for instance, the one that DRG suggested in the chat, Kubeflow's dash model data registry namespace. We can even, I assume, have a manifest that create that namespace, because by default, I don't think it is existing.
Right.
So if that works with the working group manifest lead, so Julius, this works with me. And frankly, I think it will be, I have a hinge that will be most acceptable, better acceptable than the solution to say, hey, the users created have access to the Kubeflow stop space, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And it probably will, simplify users' lives. Access management, at the namespace level is a lot easier than,
Great.
instance and services level. Right?
So we are getting back with that with the community to see if that's acceptable, and we can get that into 1.10. Apologies for the late discovery of that, but we realized that behavior when we did the integration and we finished the integration last week, and it was just like our findings. So yeah, that's that. But let's see if we have time to just propose this and implement. I don't see this being a big change, since it's just like a few tweaks around like the deployment, but let's see. So yeah, we'll manage that either. So yeah, perfect.
All right, thank you so much, Joel. So I take it as you as an action item that in addition to that in addition to that issue that describes to move the manifest into the root, and in addition to writing sort of like the additional part of the tutorial here that will speak about where to deploy, there will be an action to modify this manifest to actually be applied to a new designated Kubeflow model registries namespace. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. And a follow-up question. Cool. Like those are two steps. Could we start promoting the manifest and I'm sorry. Let me rephrase. We can start promoting the manifest right now, since everything's completed in that regard. It's acceptable for us to start raising PR for that and continue conversations around the other topic in parallel or something like that.
Yeah, let's say I'm not saying that everything needs to happen at once. So if you want to start to move the manifest in place, there is no harm, because if you don't kubectl apply them, I mean, it's not that easy to break. So definitely.
Perfect. That sounds perfect. Okay, great.
At least from my view, what Dheeraj, Ramesh, do you have any other concern about that GitHub issue that the folks have raised?
No concerns from me.
All right.
All right. Thanks. So I think that's everything regarding Model Registry. Okay, thanks a lot.
No, thank you all. And also I take it that sort of like the integration with the central dashboard is done. We need to clarify this detail about access security. These are the part that actually is missing. Yeah?
That's perfect, Matteo. I would like to finish us like this on the good note that we did the integration. Is everything integration? Is just a setup that we need to fine tune.
Okay, no, it's very clear, and actually it's much appreciated. And this is also, I think, the reason why the release team is pushing for a code freeze, so that sort of like these things as pop up as I expect. And this we have a perfect example of it. So it's more of a matter of coordinating for the solution that we've done. Right.
Thank you so much. I just want to add, thanks for all the hard work UI team has been doing. Really, this is the one that is going to put Model Registry, Kubeflow on the roadmap. I truly think so.
Yeah, and thanks for all the help. Like, if without you guys, it would have been possible. So yeah, thanks a lot.
Absolutely, it's great to have these coordinations. So totally appreciate it. All right, thank you, Griffin. Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, Eder, and everybody as well from the rest of the teams on these ones. From UI point of view, this issue I consider it done. Eder, can you nod me if we tackle on all the aspect of this point?
Yes, there's 2 pull requests pending. I'm just listing them for Milos in the Model Registry community chat.
All right. And then moving on, Milos, I think that you wanted to speak about these 2 items.
Yes, I will just quickly go over those because we have much more important things, but it's good to give you a heads up regarding some things that we are planning to do. So one of these things is very important. It's practically a part to practically push Kubeflow to graduate in the CNCF graduation program, and that will bring, the enterprise adoption, etc. So a lot of advantages in that. But the process is not trivial, and I'm practically now checking this badge. Badge is kind of. I will share my screen so I can. Sorry for my voice. I'm sick, unfortunately. So let me share entire screen. That's the easiest thing to do. So this is. I hope. Do you see my screen? Okay,
It's
awesome.
now we can see model registry open as best practice.
So there is a number of things that we need to do, and it seems that every working group will have to do that on their own because Kubeflow is a complex project, right? We have model registries, Spark operator, pipeline, etc. So different teams, different things going on, and they're not 100% sure. We're gonna check that, but it seems that every working group will have to practically go through this. And there's a number of things we need to get this passing level criteria. And then in future, who knows, silver and gold. But this is the goal. We are giving a big amount of time to fix all the issues. We're talking about a year, maybe year plus. So because it's a lot of things. Currently, we are on 19%, and we need to reach 100% for model registry and also for other stuff. So these things are practically generated. Some of these things are generated and extracted information automatically by some script here, and we'll have to go practically step by step to first understand what they're requesting from us, and then whether we are meeting these criteria or not meeting, or we need more clarification, etc. So there's different things to see, like security, quality, change control, etc. So it's a big. I don't want to go into details. This is not super urgent currently, but I just want to give the idea about what is going to happen in future, and just to ask if there is anybody who's maybe interested in helping practically from the model registry group to say, hey, I want to participate, I want to help, I want to go together with people that will be, let's say, responsible from the Kubeflow community to say, hey, for model registry, this is good, this is not good, we have to work on this, we have to work on that, etc. So it's gonna be a long-term thing. So if you apply for this, count that this is something that will take a year or something like that. So it's not trivial, it's not super fast. It's not fast, so it will take some time, but I think it will be very fun. Okay, don't need to answer me or give me any. So like, no need to volunteer right now. Just think about it, and we'll talk a little more on community meeting tomorrow. So that was about this one. And second thing I wanted to talk about is about documentation. And example, let's see here. Let's say Spark Operator. They have this developer guide where they're kind of helping people who want to maybe start developing, helping creating, working on some improvements, etc. So I'm not sure if we have that for Model Registry. Currently, I don't see that. Like, if you have a contributor, somebody who wants to contribute to a Model Registry, I think it'd be good to maybe, I don't know, I would like to see that. Like, say, hey, I want to start doing something for a Model Registry. How can I set up my local environment in order to, like, run tests, do some stuff, try some changes, etc. So I'm not sure if that exists. And also, I'm not sure that we have these good first issues labels for the tickets. Maybe I'm wrong for the issues in the GitHub. So those tickets that are helpful for people who want to start to contribute, but they are not sure how to choose. So we can maybe add this, the other, I think pipelines, they have it, and some other working groups, they have these labels that can use practically to point issues that are suitable for new people. Okay, so these are the things I wanted to talk about.
Miloš, thank you so much. Just to this latter part, there is a contributing getting started guide, actually split through contributing.md and readme.md for historical reasons. But definitely, I think it's a good idea that we link to the website, maybe in the reference somewhere to say, hey, if you're looking to get started, there are some additional information. I'm not a fan of having that in the website personally, because I think the closer we are to the code, the better will be maintained. And speaking to that, actually, I had somebody that reported to me some typos in the past in those files. So I think is that what we're missing here, and thank you for raising the point, is to make it available, surface it through the website. So this is for the latter part. For the beginner part, so I might have missed something. So the OpenSSF things, I assume then is done by components of Kubeflow. So every component of Kubeflow needs to go through this process.
We are not 100% sure. I had the call today with Amber. That is our understanding. She will get back from info from the CNCF people. But currently our understanding is that we'll have to, like, separately, everybody will have to go through this process, but it's not like 100% sure. So we'll talk about that tomorrow, and hopefully we'll have feedback from CNCF people.
No, makes sense. And actually, because fortunately, sort of like the initial metrics was not very high, but I'm kind of like relieved that most of the actual answers were question marks. So I assume that it was not automatically detected.
Yeah,
so it's
exactly.
So that sounds like normal. I'm definitely interested with this because we went through the same exercise for the license checks and all the connected items over there. So I'm personally definitely most interested. But in general, would be please raise a GitHub issue with the link to that website, please, so that we make sure that this is sort of like aware to the to everybody, so that we have one place where we log it. Could you do that? Or thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
And then I saw that you had an item for Kubeflow marketing meeting action items. So I'm not sure.
Well, that was marketing. Practically, that was one of the things that I thought is interesting. Like, so we want to introduce more people to push like awareness, etc., to get more people involved. There are also other things, but I don't want to waste time right now. For that, there's time we can talk about other things from the marketing, like just how we're gonna, like, the blogs and the user testimonials, etc. But okay, let's leave that for our next call.
All right, thank you so much, Miloš. Much appreciated. go through the box. All right. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, Milos, again. So there is a request for review just in general for cross-platform builds. So this is, I need to make sure why it was filling out the DCO. So there was this contributor reached out to me to raise awareness again that this PR is open. From what I've seen, it just slightly modified the existing setups that we have. So I still need to go through the details, but just raising this for awareness to the team. So dear Alessio, I may ask for as well your eyes on this one, please, so that we make sure that we address if there are any concerns and make sure that it works for all intended purposes. And then with that one, another big one, I assume, is that there is willingness to speak about the RFE for Model Catalog. So I assume here is where, Dheeraj, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Matteo. Let me share my screen here. Yeah, can you folks see it?
Yeah, we see Kubeflow Model Catalog presentation.
Yeah, great, thanks. So yeah, there's a RFE for this that I started last week. There haven't been very many comments about it and stuff, but I wanted to talk about this feature that we came up with last week. This comes from a requirement downstream in Red Hat, and we figured this is something that the community in general can benefit from as well. So let me just go through the slides quickly. So in general, the problems basically are that we have several public model catalogs like Hugging Face, and there are multiple companies and organizations that are also offering foundation models now, like Granite models from Red Hat Registry on their OCI repository and stuff. So the way the workflow works right now is that users have to access these catalogs separately through their own UIs or APIs, download those models locally into their org, into their storage repositories, and then start using those models. If they want to use them with Model Registry, then they have to explicitly manually register the models in the local Model Registry and then start using them. For example, if they want to customize them with their own local training data or things like that. So yeah, so they have to use like a different set of websites, APIs, UIs, and it's kind of hard on users. So our proposal basically is to combine this into like a common catalog service for Kubeflow users. So I'm going to use some terminology here, right? I just wanted to be explicit about what we are calling what and what do we mean by those terms. So when these slides mention local, we're talking about specific users like environment or organization where they're working, right? So if I say something like local storage, then we're talking about some storage service, some internal S3 service, or even like an internal OCI repository or something that the user controls and maintains. And when we say external, it's external to that user's environment, the Kubeflow user's environment. Could be like the Hugging Face repository where you can download models using it, or could be Red Hat's OCI registry where you can download models using either Podman or Docker and so on. So based on that, we have kind of a difference or different kinds of repositories or sources of models, right? So what we are calling catalog is this external collection of models that are available over the web that you download, open source models typically. And registry is sort of the internal collection of models that the user might have started by downloading something from an external catalog, and then working on it, modifying it, customizing it for local data or their internal data. Typically, there's some IP associated with it if the model is within the registry, and it includes, the sort of the resources and the effort and the cost the user might have spent in trying to train that model locally, or customize that model, foundation model locally, and so on. So, any questions on this so far? Yeah, feel free to just raise your hand, ask questions at any point. All right. So hopefully that's clear. So based on that, then we have this distinction, right? So what are the features, right, of what a model catalog is and what a model registry is? A catalog, has external retained models. As I mentioned, there could be foundation models, most likely trained on external data sets, public data sets, and model registries are local models. Could be using private data sets. And a model catalog's data typically is static. Once that's registered there, in the sense, it's just the model metadata, this information about the model. If you want to serve that model, you have to bring it to your local store or something. You typically wouldn't serve a model directly from the Hugging Face Git repository, for example, right? You would copy it locally to some local store and then serve it from there. Model registry, on the other hand, is the opposite, right? You have not just a model, but in model registry, in Kubeflow specifically, the Kubeflow model registry, we also have the ability to track metadata about the model's life cycle. So in the future, we'll have APIs for tracking experiments, runs, training data. We'll also have APIs for, or we even right now have APIs for tracking deployments through inference services that we can record metadata about in the model registry. And in the future, we could have capability to even store information about metrics and stuff for doing things like hyperparameter optimization and stuff like that. That kind of information, and certainly that kind of audit log is not available in like an external catalog. Right? That's only available in a local model registry, because that represents the model and its life cycle, what it has gone under in its life within a particular user's deployment or environment. So yeah, the model catalogs are imported in local store. Registered models, are built in the local store. They may start there as part of some local experiment or training, and they may even, be eventually promoted to some external catalog, right? You might post something, you might build some interesting model and say, oh, this looks like a foundation model, and should be promoted to Hugging Face and exported there. So the public catalog service typically has some high-level metadata and the actual artifacts themselves. A model registry has information about the model, but that information is meant for private use and not really meant for like public consumption outside the organization or the user's environment. So it might have information about things like staging, testing, and production environments where a certain model has been deployed and run as an inference service and so on. So yeah, the examples are, as I mentioned earlier, Hugging Face and Red Hat OCI registry, and within a private organization, a model registry might point to their own storage services, their own private S3 instances, or any other S3 services or registries they might be using, or even things like PVCs, just storing it in file systems in Kubernetes clusters and stuff. Any questions on the distinction between the two?
Not a question, but just maybe just a detail. So I totally agree that catalog models are sort of like in general imported into local artifact store and then registered or used locally. But I think it's also very valid that cataloged models are not important and just directly, if a user choose to do so, may decide to just deploy straight from the whatever external repository of source it is. So
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah, but there might be considerations, right? That might not be something you might want to do in production, for example, right? Do you really want to run your, production systems that are sourcing models directly from Hugging Face, right? There might be performance issues or things like that. It might be a disconnected environment where this is deployed and may not be able to access the external, storage service.
Yeah, I totally agree that there are a lot of good reasons for copying data to some local artifact store. I'm only saying that just hit there, I can see definitely that it's not a mandatory thing.
No, it's not mandatory. Yeah. You could serve it. Yeah, it's not optimal though. Yeah.
Yep. Great.
All right. So as I mentioned earlier, there are problems in accessing model catalogs. You have different UIs, websites, and APIs that you have to deal with. If you want to build something like this capability in Kubeflow dashboard, where Kubeflow itself can discover these models from different catalogs, like from Hugging Face and so on, you want to be able to show them to Kubeflow users. Then you have to build that capability in the UI layer, where now you're writing this complicated UI code that has references directly to these APIs from different catalog sources. So our proposal is basically to create an abstraction around this, to create a high-level catalog API. The keyword is simple there. We don't want to support each and every single feature that every single catalog service out there supports and implements. We just want to be able to get to the high level information, like the catalog, the models themselves that are stored in the catalog, the information about them. And if you want to get into the detailed information that a particular catalog source implementation provides, then we'll provide links to that so that you can go to Hugging Face, for example, and look at some extra information that Hugging Face itself carries that might not be available in other catalog sources, like a simple OCI registry, for example. So yeah, Peter.
Yeah, one quick question. Do you ever see those UIs being part of the Model Registry web app, or being more general for the Kubeflow?
Right. So that's a good question, right? So these APIs, right now, in the interest of getting something built quickly, we are proposing that we can add these APIs directly to the Model Registry service itself. And in the next slide, I'll talk about the actual like high-level architecture and stuff. But yeah, in theory, you could break this out into another component, right? Like a Kubeflow component or Kubeflow service, where it's just a model catalog living on its own with its own APIs. But in the future, we might want to be able to create like lineage links and store information about things like, oh, this model that's published in the local model registry actually came from this model in this catalog and so on.
Yep, makes sense.
So there might be value in like keeping them together so that we can create those linkages and track lineage.
Yeah, because if both for the APIs and also for the user interfaces, we can start this by doing in the Model Registry web app. If the community agrees, we can iterate much more quickly.
Yeah.
And then if their central dashboard decides, oh, this should be our orthogonal feature, we can always move it.
Break it out. Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. Yeah, good question. All right. The proposal we have put forward starts with something simple like a YAML file or files-based catalog, where you can just point to where the foundation models live. For example, in some Docker registry somewhere, and just provide the metadata directly in the file. We'll read that file and expose this catalog API in this service, and users can browse that and discover those models that were actually living in some external Docker or OCI registry. This would also allow users to host internal catalogs if they wanted to. If, for example, it's a very large organization, like, let's say Walmart or something, that have sort of foundation models across the entire enterprise, and there are a huge number of groups and teams that would like to reuse them, then they could create sort of an internal catalog that points to all these in-house foundation models that can be then reused or accessed, and maybe trained locally and modified by teams within the organization, right? So yeah, so the proposal is, create a high-level simple REST API in the existing model registry service, provide endpoints for high-level information that I mentioned earlier, information about models, so that we can list models in the catalogs, how to download that model, so might have some URL connection information to get to that model artifact, the actual artifact, and information about revisions, versions of that model, and so on. We'll also model catalog sources so that you can distinguish these sources of catalog. So you can have multiple catalog sources. So you could have one catalog source that points to some OCI registry, and another catalog source that points to Hugging Face, for example, and then be able to do searches within the catalog sources. The way we are going to implement the catalog sources is we're trying to keep this simple so that we can turn it around quickly. We'll just make them simple Golang APIs. So the implementation is it is sort of pluggable in the sense that we'll have a API, Golang API abstraction that hides the catalog source implementation. So the implementation could be different across different catalog sources. But it's kind of hard-coded in the sense, the Golang API has to be implemented by classes, structures that are in the model registry source repository for now. We are not thinking of making this like a highly pluggable dynamic architecture to start off the bat. We would like to start simple, keep this a simple Golang API, implement at least the YAML file-based catalog source to start, and then we'll extend that by adding capability to search Hugging Face as well, and the ability to do dynamic queries from Hugging Face using its own catalog endpoint API. Right. So that's the proposal, and this is what that high-level kind of logical architecture looks like. The way we are envisioning configuring the catalog sources is through a simple config map that registry instances point to. They load the information about how to connect to the catalog source. The information that goes in there is specific to the catalog source. So for YAML files, for example, the information might just be where do the YAML files live, or the actual content of the YAML file, maybe, if it's that simple. For Hugging Face, it might be things like what URI to use to connect to the Hugging Face API, what credentials to use. Oh yeah, by the way, the credential information will be stored as community secrets. So there might be just some secret name in here in the config map that points to the credentials to use to contact Hugging Face. So if we build it this way, because it's a config map, we could have a situation like this or deployment like this, where all the model registry instances use the same config map. So all the catalog information that comes from any model registry instance is the same. Or if the user chooses to, they could create a more complex deployment where they have different config maps for different model registry instances, and actually fetch a different catalog from different model registries for different model registries. So that's the general idea and the high-level architecture and sort of the high-level implementation ideas behind this. Any questions or concerns?
Yeah, just on the previous, it was mentioned on the previous slide, Dheeraj, but I just want to make sure that I understand correctly. To begin with, when say that we list models from Hugging Face, this config map can simply already details about the models that you want from the catalogs, where they are located, without any need to call out on a specific Hugging Face REST API to retrieve this information, but in future implementation of the provider, then
Yeah.
it could be that indeed you give the possibility to end users to invoke a remote REST API for sort of like populating the list of
Right.
models, if I understand correctly.
We could start off like that, where somebody will have to hand curate information from Hugging Face models and populate it in some YAML file, and it's basically the same YAML file implementation then running in the backend here, right? One could be pointing to an OCI registry, and one could be pointing to the models from Hugging Face. The difference being, the artifact location URIs will be different, right? But yeah, in the future, I don't think it would be too hard to create an implementation that uses the Hugging Face API to retrieve models dynamically.
Okay, so I'm not understanding. Are we suggesting that we start from which point? Because
so we start with the YAML file implementation. So
Okay.
even for Hugging Face, you could write a YAML file based catalog, but it will be static, right? In that sense, because somebody will have to manually sync the contents of that YAML file with Hugging Face. So yeah, you could sort of pretend that it's Hugging Face you're talking to, simply because somebody hand curated that YAML file with Hugging Face content. But yeah, if you really want to be able to say, oh, this is truly Hugging Face that you are fetching information from, then it has to be dynamic, right?
No, makes sense. So if I understand correctly, is that YAML file model catalog the one on the
It's the
top?
first one. Yeah.
Okay.
We can reuse it and expose information from Hugging Face as well.
And maybe without calling it Hugging Face, we could call a catalog, say that list models from Hugging Face is more of a sort of like a incidental. What I mean by that is that, for instance, if I want to have a collection of, say, Matteo's favorite model from 2024, this could likely be just a static YAML file model catalog where I list the models
Create your
that
own.
yeah, pick my own. It's coming from
Catalog.
S3, whatever. Okay, thank you.
Or yeah, even if you're like a open source model developer, a data scientist that's working on your own models, and you have published your own foundation models, yeah, you could create your own YAML file and provide your own catalog if you wished.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, Alessia.
Thank you, Diraj, for this great presentation. I have a question about the YAML file. Do you see it hosted on the deployment file system or on Kubernetes, or you fetch that with the service?
Yeah, good question. So it depends upon the content and the size of the YAML file, right? Like if it's fairly static, then yeah, this implementation could be very simple and just read it locally and just serve it directly from the Go interface here, right? If you want to build something that's kind of dynamic and has information that actually is being maintained externally, right, on some website or something, it could have the ability to maybe just do like a HTTP GET and fetch the file from some external endpoint, right, and periodically refresh that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Ramesh?
I think I feel that that YAML file needs to be somewhere other than where the model registry is deployed, right? Or it could be a configuration somehow.
Right.
That
or it could be or it could even be like a combination, right? Like you could have some kind of bootstrap YAML version of some file and then say, oh, by the way, if you can reach it, if you're not in a disconnected environment, right, then try fetching the latest version of this file from some URL.
Yeah, the idea is to the end user or end administrator of the cluster.
Yeah, there's no difference.
Exactly. Yeah, able to go independently of the model registry or model catalog installation script. Independent of that, go put whatever they want on their side of it.
Right.
In the model registry.
Yeah, like almost everything in life, it's all about control. Who controls what, right?
Right. I mean, because, as a user, end user, admin of a company, I could be installing this, but, my product manager or somebody else might be defining what I'm showing up
in the
tomorrow.
catalog.
Yeah.
Exactly.
As a developer or administrator, I would not have
Right.
any.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So it's all about like the source of truth and who controls it, right? Like if the source of truth is static and it could just be bundled here, fine, just stick it in your model registry instance. If it's not static, could be changed. The source of truth resides elsewhere at some external location, some URI or something. Then yeah, we'd have to be able to fetch it from there. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for that question. Yep.
No problem. I have another question. For the catalog sources config map, do you see that as mounted on the deployment, or do you think it's better to reach for that using the Kubernetes client?
APIs? I think it should be mounted in the deployment. We should keep things simple. I don't want to start adding model registry APIs Kubernetes APIs in the model registry right now, which is fairly, simple Go service, right? So we should just inject it as a file that model registry loads.
All right, makes sense. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, if there aren't any further questions, I'll stop the presentation now. Yeah, feel free to ask questions on Slack, or I have included the link in the presentation earlier. I'll put that in the chat as well. So that we can continue the conversation on that.
Yeah, let's continue the conversation on your proposal itself.
Yeah.
All right, great.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dheeraj, for this very comprehensive presentation. I think it puts a lot of context to the Kubeflow Model Registry is the issue 702 for those that will see the recording through YouTube. But then, indeed, this is available. Let me show. I've also already included the link in the minutes of the meeting notes. Sorry, my mouse was not working as intended. Right. Thank you so much again, Dheeraj, and everybody for their conversation and contribution. So I will not spend too much time on this issue, but I just wanted to raise about it. So we are still due to, well, I think that we are still due to a MySQL image update. We haven't received any updates from the KFP team with the previous comments. So there are, however, new contributors to the community that have sort of like raised the point again. My suggestion would be that I put this meeting point to the next Kubeflow Model Registry bi-weekly, and then by the time I think that bumping the image, we should start to do it, because if there are no feedback from KFP, we can make our own decision. But I don't want to take any more time. Thank you for staying longer on the line. I think it was very great topics and presentation from the UI. So for those that have seen this recording, there is a good discussion at the beginning, to Milos for all the updates, and from Dheeraj about these RFEs for the model catalog. And with that, I'll just remind everybody that every Tuesday there is a Kubeflow community call. So I strongly invite everybody to join that one as well. And for all the rest, for the Model Registry, there is the CNCF Slack channel, and we will see everybody at the next bi-weekly, so in 2 weeks from now. Thank you all again, much appreciated.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Thanks.